being like, I know ball. I know who the best plays are.
Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by Anthony, famously known as Awen in the DFS community. And he's on an absolute monster tear since joining the scene. It's only been a few years, but just really came out of nowhere. And before we dive into all the amazing accomplishments he's had recently, I saw your incredible story on Twitter. And yeah, this just was like super inspiring, man. Just for all the grinders out there, people working off of small bankrolls, trying to hit it big, grinding the projections, coming up with your own models. Not everyone's doing that type of stuff, but yeah, man, if you could just take it from the top, this story really just hit hard for me. I won't read it myself. He's awen419 on Twitter if you want to take a peek. Yeah, man, just really want to hear the story from yourself.
I think that when I came onto scene, a lot of people expected, because most people don't pick up until you're shipping contests and like you're maxing out entries, right? And so people kind of assume automatically that you have a big bankroll. And I had a lot of people assuming that, and I think I just want to clear the picture and kind of inspire other people that, I always get questions from, beginners and people who kind of want to get started, other people that are around my age who are like, wow, this is like what are you doing right now? Like, I see that you're like grinding. And it was a really hard start for me. I think that, I really did start on like 20 entries and these like it's like min caching. I've had turmoils where, I've had downswings that really made me think about, hey, should I quit? And now I look back and I'm like, wow, that downswing was like, I only lost for like 2 days and I lost maybe like $100, like very different from where I am now. But growing up, I didn't, I was just like your casual kid that just enjoyed watching football, right? I just pretty much watched all 4 major sports. My family friend kind of got me into the Pittsburgh sports teams because growing up in New York, it was not a lot of people like playing football and stuff like that. But I grew up from a very underprivileged household, and going to college, the only thing I was focusing on was, going to school, trying to get a good job, trying to, help support my family and that stuff. But when I turned 18, kind of a moment of luck, they just made DFS legal. Well, not DFS, but like they made the pick'ems legal, like Prize Picks and Underdog. And so at the time I was like, okay, well, I really enjoy the sports. I see that there's sign up bonuses and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, at that point they're, giving out so many promos that was basically negative EV not to like do it. And so starting at $100, I started grinding out on Prize Picks actually. And they had this promo because they had this promo for the Super Bowl where basically like you grind out like these gauntlets of challenges, like, oh, you have to play like $25 of pick'ems on basketball or football and stuff like that. And so I was grinding that out, and I turned my $100 into a free roll of a $500 five flex for the Super Bowl. And people that do the math, it's like 8%, 9% to hit. And I was so lucky that I was able to hit for the Super Bowl, and my bankroll of 100 suddenly turned to 5K. And that was before I was doing like actual DFS and like the drafts, snake drafts, or salary. And 5K was unheard of to me. Like at the time, my mom was making, we were unfortunately in the poverty threshold. She was making like 15K a year for a single mother and 2 kids. And so that was my first year at college. So I kind of wanted to like treat myself to things that I never had. And that was my first time getting an iPhone. I finally had a computer that can actually like handle the workload that I got at school. So instead of like writing down notebooks and all these things, I actually got myself these nice things I never had. And so after that, I was like, damn, I'm pretty good at this. So I did pick'ems on other sites, and that led me to Underdog, which then led me to the draft games. And my first ever contest on Underdog was an afternoon slate. And I only had like 20, 25 entries. And miraculously, I binked. I remember it was when Josh Jacobs was still on the Raiders, and he went nuclear that week. And from that point on, I was like, damn, I really love DraftKings more than pick'ems because I think it's just a lot more fun seeing that player v player environment. It's not like hit or miss. It's just you just have to do better than the other person, right? And I was like, damn, I was looking at the ADPs at the time, and I was seeing how people were drafting. I was like, this is pretty inefficient. And so, I just took advantage of it. And I played some more football, and then I played some basketball. I dabbled into it, and then I had to take a break for a while after some personal issues. But you know, the following year, because I started my sophomore year, and then junior year, I really hit onto the scene, and that's when people started to notice me on Underdog. It was during the NBA season, and at the time, things were so inefficient. I was, self duping a bunch of times, which a lot of people see as negative EV, but like if you know that your team is going to come top 20, you might as well just keep duping that lineup, right? Because people aren't going to play the, 236 ADP guys. And so I was grinding that. And then that led me to FanDuel and DraftKings, obviously. And now we're in the position that I am now. And I'm like, I look back at it and it's so crazy the path that I took to be where I am now.
Yeah, that's an awesome story, man. Just starting with 100. Next thing you know, you got 5K, you upgrade your laptop, your phone, you got the tools, discovering new games. All these games are in their infantile stages. Like you said, a lot of the games were inefficient at the time. Obviously, people are getting sharper now, but you're getting sharper as well. But yeah, man, that's truly inspiring stuff. Would you say your tough upbringing has contributed to your competitive edge? And what are some of your goals going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I've always been competitive in the things I do. It just makes sense that, I've always been told to never settle for, like a top 5 or a top 1%. Like you want to be as perfect as you can. And I think, especially with Underdog, where, it takes time to snake draft and things like that. There were times where I was really grinding and just staying up all night trying to max every single contest and hand drafting and trying to read every room and because there's certain things like for football, right? You have to pay attention to like the roster construction of the people around you. I had notes on people in my drafts where you know because there's a lot of maxers and stuff like that. You see familiar faces in the lobby and you know what type of ownership and who they're bringing up in their rankings. But I was like truly, I was min maxing every little detail, and I think I could really credit that to the way that I was brought up and my family that supported me. And then in terms of goals, I kind of just want to keep, growing my bankroll and trying to get on these bigger sites because, you know, even though I've come a long way, I think that there's still a lot to catch up to like the guys who've been doing this for like a decade, who have truly perfected the process. And there's so many different sites to play and so many different contests to really sink my teeth into.
Good stuff, man. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. You're so early into this and have had so much early success. Just the more you continue to grow that bankroll, it's going to be exciting to see what you're going to be able to accomplish. So awesome to hear. And then I just have some of your successes from the past couple years pulled up here. Starting back, this was 2024, which looks like really when you first burst onto the scene on Underdog. You said, this is a good way to start my fantasy account. Cult off the GOATs, T-Box and John Boy Beats. I'm familiar with T-Box. He's one of the maxers. Definitely an NBA. Also dabbles in NFL for sure. $8,000, nearly 13,000 in total winnings. That's really, really fire way to start your Underdog career, obviously. Yeah, it looks like this was basketball. So would you say you prefer basketball or NFL? Which one do you think you have a bigger edge in? Which one do you have more fun drafting? I guess dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, back then, I think that basketball was my favorite sport just because of how daily it was. I mean, I really liked the aspect of just grinding it out, and so basketball was my favorite sport because every day the slates changed and there was plenty of volume at the time and things were pretty inefficient. Football's always been my favorite. Like that's my childhood sport. I grew up playing. I grew up watching. I was a big fan of the Steelers. So that's always been. There's a lot of volume, obviously. So a lot of a little bit more casual. So like obviously it's fun to like grind ROI wise. But if I had to rank them, I would actually say football is probably my best sport. Then baseball. Baseball I've just fallen in love with the last couple of years, and then basketball would be there. And then I dabble in some other sports I like to watch recreationally, like golf, for example. I play a little bit of golf.
Golf is super fun to draft. Do you ever play the Underdog draft games, like the dailies, just like the weekend dailies?
Yeah. I think it's a lot of fun just seeing how crazy things change. Well, they just changed it now, where before it was like leaderboard didn't matter at all. So you just kind of just try to pick the best golfers and everything like that. But now that they changed the scoring format this past year, things change so frequently. Like you could be in first, it can be in first on Saturday, day 3, and then boom, you're done. And obviously things with like missing cut and all that jazz. It was kind of rough because I live in New York, so they unfortunately didn't have golf and WNBA for a while, so I had to take a break. But I'm back in the streets now, trying to grind golf. Um, it's weird. It's not as much edge, right? Because like projection wise, it can get pretty funky. Because it's like literally just a difference of like a couple strokes can be, like 20 leaderboard positions. So, but it's a lot of fun to draft. I really enjoy golf.
Golf's super fun, and it's really easy to get unique without being stupid. You can give up so much projectable points in NFL or basketball by scrolling, but golf, you can scroll away, and from my experience, it doesn't really hurt you a ton. Obviously, you need those top dogs in your lineup, but
Yeah.
you also mentioned MLB, though. This was a 6-figure hit just recently this year. You just keep adding to your portfolio of games you play. Obviously, you started big on NBA and NFL, but MLB now, I didn't even realize you were playing MLB. So you want to talk about that a little bit here?
Yeah, I after I did basketball and football, because I was in college at the time, I really took the summer as my way to relax at the time. And then at one point I got really bored, so I was like, oh, I'll just dabble in baseball for the summer. And I sucked. I was so bad at it. I didn't understand stacking and everything like that. I wasn't really paying too much attention. So that first summer I played like maybe like a week and got smoked. And I was like, okay, I'll forget about it. I'm gonna worry about this grind next summer. And then the next summer, I kind of went MIA for a bit. A lot of people noticed I just like wasn't playing basketball for like maybe like a month or two, and I really just grinded out baseball and trying to build my own sheets and models and stuff like that for projections. And I had a lot of success. I think last season this is my first season playing playing baseball on salary sites. But last year I played on Underdog, and I was like crushing it. I remember I had like maybe like a 30% daily ROI, and it was like truly absurd. And that's when I started to like really fall in love with baseball. Because the things I liked about basketball, like I mentioned earlier, about how things change every day. It's a daily slate. You have to worry about waiting all week, right? Like for football, you wait all week, and you just get smoked if like the 1 p.m. game nukes and like you're stacking the 4 p.m. game. So baseball's a lot of fun where it's just daily and things change all the time with the different pitchers and handedness. But baseball been having a decent amount of success.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm sure that's just good brain exercise, learning a new sport, what goes into it, what the meta is, what the strategies are, stuff of that nature. And just to see that you can go from not knowing much to 6-figure success is just really cool to see, man. Just transitioning, you're talking about creating your own projections, even for baseball. I'm just going to scroll towards the Dog Bowl, which is a contest on Underdog where the top 3 each week qualify for a trip where you compete for $1 million in prizes. You get the trip, you get $10,000 off the bat. It's going to take me a while because you just have so many big scores here. But it's a super competitive, super tough contest, very rake heavy. If you're not top 3, it's going to be really tough to profit on the week. So you also qualified for the NBA one, which is just insane. But here we go. So you can qualify up to 3 times, and he did it all 3 times last season. He used his own projections. It's just super impressive stuff. He's been there before. He did it again. Without giving away the secret sauce, like what goes into creating your own projection models? Obviously, they didn't teach you that in college. So like, how'd you like learn to even teach yourself something like that?
There's a lot of data scraping when you look at advanced metrics, and obviously there's some obvious ones like target share and you look at matchups and how they'll go. And then there's obviously finer things like just like minimal weather stuff. So there's a little bit of coach speak involved. Football is a lot of fun for Dog Bowl because it's 12 seats, so 12-man draft. So there's a lot of VORP, which is value over relative position. It's just like, would you rather a round 1 quarterback versus a round 6 quarterback versus round 1 running back versus round 6 running back? So there's a lot of the projections are really important there because of VORP. I think that I think the secret's kind of out. The cat's out of the bag for Dog Bowl, that like round 1 quarterback was like never optimal, or like round 2 quarterbacks never optimal. And with the different projections, like it really let me auto, which I think is kind of a funny story. A lot of people in the community know that we're for dog bowl because I've been maxing. There's a lot of times where I just had to auto because I'm not going to stay on my computer 24/7. I only draft Thursday, Friday, Saturday for the dog bowl, and I think that there's a lot of mixed opinions. I'm a very big proponent on, hey, I like drafting late in the week with all the information. I get the early drafters, like you want to before anything comes out, you can get really great combos. But for me, with my different projections, I can already notice the difference, like the different values in ADP. So I don't really pay attention too much to ADP when I'm drafting these games.
Yeah, a lot of what you said rings true. I did compile some data from the Dog Bowl last year, and elite quarterback definitely wasn't the thing to do. And really taking into account VORP and stuff like that is what led to success. Also, the early drafting really didn't give people an edge from what I saw because it didn't matter if you got that guy cheap or if you ended up getting him after he steamed up to the first or second round. Sometimes you just needed to have that guy. So I have the data up here. I actually also have one of your lineups. And I just wanted to see your thoughts, like if any of this data rings true, or if you think just projections are the end all be all when it comes to these contests. So you were talking about it, elite quarterback. This is over an 11-week sample, actually 8 weeks. I have 11 weeks of data here, but it only compiles 8 weeks here. But we do see a pretty clear pattern, and I plan to continue to update this throughout the 2026 season to see if I can build off of it. But yeah, elite quarterback just really didn't get home very often. It was a 5th or 6th round quarterback that put up enough points to get the lineup home. And then just some key takeaways. More often than not, 1-2-2-1 was the optimal build, which means 2 running backs, having a running back in your flex. No quarterback bring back was successful. People too often were trying to force that bring back. Didn't really need that level of correlation. And then you leaned into the naked QB a bit more than other people did, was viable both ways. Obviously, QB stack got home more often than not, but naked was plenty viable at 33%. And then just as far as stacking goes, both single stack and double stack were viable, but triple stacking never got home. And then one other thing that really stood out to me was the partners you stack with. The most viable was just a single stack QB plus wide receiver. And then stacking the running back was not successful at all. But what do you think about this? Do you think maybe this is just a short sample? Do you think there is some viability to these metrics? And then I guess my last question would be, do you think projections are the end all be all? Because obviously if you're auto drafting, you're not really paying a lot of attention to saying, oh, I want to make sure I'm stacking my quarterback, or I want to make sure I'm building 1-2-2-1 instead of 1-1-3-1. Maybe you're using position limits, but I just wanted to get your opinion on some of that stuff.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the key takeaways. I mean, I think that the easiest one is the 1-2-2-1 build. I think that although if you're playing for ceiling and you want to play the 1-1-3-1 with like a double stack quarterback, it's definitely viable. But I think that for me and my projection difference, because I think there's I don't know if you noted it, there's a lot of like round 5 running backs there that I think had good VORP that I would take. 1-2-2-1 in half PPR is pretty much like the running backs are almost always gonna outproject the receivers. Like a Tony Pollard is still gonna outproject maybe like an Addison or a wide receiver 2 on any other team. So even though obviously Pollard and Titans aren't a great offense, he's still going to do better than having that third wide receiver. Running backs have a lot of volatility in terms of like taking Bijan or taking CMC, where these are receiving backs that can, their projection difference is so vast because of their ability to get that half PPR and touchdown scoring. That I like. For me personally, I like going early running back. QB almost is like never there. Like the only thing, like I'm sure the one I didn't look at, but the one QB one is probably like a Josh Allen or Lamar team where it's just like these rushing QBs and they just kind of nuke. But for the most part, there's almost no reason to take Josh Allen or Lamar within like the first 15 or so picks, unless it's unless it's like maybe the first week or first 4 weeks where there's there's no buys and things like that. Triple stacking is probably a bit overboard. I think because I would prefer to stack if I could, but I think that people are very aggressively stacking when they don't need to, and they're taking if they have their if they're set on a QB, they'll take a wide receiver too, which I don't think is like that optimal. Last year, for example, I think one of my favorite like round 6 quarterbacks was like Aaron Rodgers or something. Like these offenses, or like maybe some like rushing quarterback like Bo Nix, who was still going in the 6th round. Those guys, like, yes, they can get done on the ground, or Aaron Rodgers, right? Like, who are you gonna stack him with? Like that Steelers offense last year had so many different tight ends and things like that, like random guys who could score, that he could reach a ceiling with the passing touchdowns, but still like nobody would have his stack. So I wouldn't worry too much about QB stacks, because you can also get very different, right? Everybody's going to try to take like a round 6 QB to stack with a receiver, when you get very different with these like Bo Nix teams.
Speaking of not forcing a QB stack, I have to imagine everyone had Caleb plus Rome this week against Dallas, and this was one of your teams that qualified.
Mhm.
And I remember being in these lobbies and you just kept taking Caleb naked over and over and over. And I remember even the Badge Bros, like, why does he keep taking Caleb naked? Or like, I don't know. I remember it drew Nez's attention. You sniped Nez on a Rome team or something, but you were really leaning into Caleb this week. And he's not necessarily a traditional guy to run naked. Maybe you would think more of a Josh Allen or a Hurts, but you could also tell your story of maybe he spreads it around, maybe he runs one in. I guess you just had him projecting pretty well this week. Like, what was the reason behind that? Because obviously it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I think people severely underestimate Caleb's obviously ability to scramble. I remember there were a few players whose projections were just insane, and for me, one of them was Rome. And I think for maybe a span of 5 weeks, he was just over projecting. People were just jamming him, and I'm personally just not afraid to really go naked QB. Like I said, I don't think it's necessarily end all be all to stack your QB. Actually, I'm kind of surprised that I went double like AJ Brown Devontae on this team, but I'm not really shocked that I went naked Caleb on this one.
There was some viability to the teammate pairing. We didn't see the quarterback bring back get home a ton, but we did see, let me see where the data is. A secondary teammate correlation about 20% of the time. And here's yours, the AJB plus Devonta without Hurts. It was more common with a running back plus wide receiver. I guess it's a little harder to get home when you pair 2 wide receivers together, but I mean, you might have auto drafted that one, who knows? And those were just your top projected plays.
I think it'd be interesting to see the rounds, because I obviously it's kind of hard to remember what the ADP was of this week.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of that data. This is just how early the running backs went, and majority of the time, RB1 got home drafting your running back in the first round, almost 50% of the time. If you were to just really lean into that data, I think you could just draft RB first round all season, and you will lose some weeks, but I think more often than not, you're leaning into what works. And then speaking of the week we're talking about, I was kind of alluding to this before, where, look, so one person got Jordan Mason in the 2nd round, pick 20. This was probably a Thursday drafter, right? You got Jordan Mason 1st round, pick 6. And it just didn't matter, right? People get so worried about, oh, that guy's so expensive now. Oh, he's steamed up. I wish I drafted him earlier in the week. Now I can't compete against those teams. It didn't matter for you. You still got home. So you went RB to start. I can't remember how early Caleb was going that week. He might have been a 4th rounder. Hunter Henry was definitely your last pick, I have to imagine. You definitely double clicked RB.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I do remember the Mason was injury news, and I remember that week that weekend that he steamed up. But for the most part, I mean, obviously in this case it's different, right? Because Jonathan Taylor versus versus Genti didn't go so well. But it's not really end all be all if you have the guy that's steaming up to be like, obviously if some guy steams up between the 2nd and the 1st round, it's not that big a deal, because the difference between some of these 1st round, 2nd round running backs aren't something that because I know there's a lot of people that are like, oh, because this guy's steamed up and there's already teams like super teams with this guy at value, you shouldn't draft him at all. But that's really, it's the same thing for like, let's say if you're doing like you're taking 2 round 6 guys, right, in these football drafts, it's a completely viable strategy. I don't think that you have to worry too much about the difference in projection between this week. Obviously, it didn't play out, but like between Taylor and Genty, you can just swap what round you're taking Mason.
Right, exactly. So I think that's a really good takeaway. And then just in summary, as far as this data goes, like what's your lean? Are you more of a projections guy? Do you think you should be leaning into some of this data, or do you think maybe there's some viability to both?
Yeah, I would say I'm a big projection guy. I think that when it comes to roster construction, or in terms of like when you should draft, when should you draft your running back, when should you draft your wide receiver, there's some base data where it's like, yeah, drafting an early running back is pretty strong, and then trying to get like maybe like a pretty round 4, round 3 RB1 on a mid team is still viable. But a lot of it does play into VORP at the end of the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that a very interesting case for VORP is the tight ends, right? Where, Brock Bowers and Trey McBride are like there's a lot of people because of VORP that think they should definitely be going at the end of the round 1, like 8 through 12 and stuff like that. Or do you take the round 6 tight end? And for that one, like for tight ends, for example, I can't say what is the right answer because each week it's different, right? Depending on the Bowers matchup, depending on Trey McBride matchup, and all these round 6 tight ends that are pretty much all around the same projection. There's some weeks where it makes sense to play the VORP of going round 6 tight ends instead of round 1 tight end. So at the end of the day, it is a projections game. You shouldn't have a set roster construction in your head. I want to just get into the 1-2-2-1. There were a couple weeks. I do remember there were a couple weeks last year where I've had a handful of 1-1-3-1 teams. My third wide receiver was out projecting the second running back, and you shouldn't worry too much about that, right? Like you shouldn't, because I know now on Underdog that you can set roster limits, right? People are just like doing 1-2-2-1 as their max, and they're just leaving it at that. Mm-hmm. But if you have the ability and the time to hand draft, you should not be limiting your roster construction.
Yeah, well said. I think one of these Judkins teams was yours. Do you remember?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but if I had to guess, it's probably the Olave team.
I was about to say you went like a 4 straight weeks of just hammering Olave, which obviously paid dividends. So just tying into your VORP conversation about tight ends, we really did see Trey McBride separate. And I think I do have a stat on elite tight end somewhere here. Yeah, elite tight end, 28% of the time, elite QB, 5%. So leaning into the elite tight end paid a lot more dividends than the quarterback. And I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Because the tier gap between Trey McBride and the tight ends that go in the 6th round is just so much more vast than the tier gap between, let's say, Josh Allen and Bo Nix. This just kind of paints that picture. You probably went Quinshawn 1st round, Trey McBride 2nd round, and then just went projectable points from there. The majority of the times you got there last season, you did go naked quarterback. So
yeah, this was that like crazy Bo Nix nuke week. I'm surprised that the guy that came in 3rd didn't have a Bo Nix team. I think because they usually play the 4 p.m. games. I can't remember if it was this week in general, but I don't know if he was at risk. It's the same. It's the same. I remember now this game. Yeah, it was on the late slate because they were playing in Denver, and that was a hectic week because I remember those guys were scrambling and I forgot what Nix's stat line was, but I think I didn't have any hope that week because obviously the Kamara 4.4 was like not viable at all. I think most people that see me in the streets know I'm a big Olave and Kamara like shill.
Yeah,
but it's I do remember that week now. It was I think that was towards the end. It was like week 9 or something like that. Olave, week 7, yeah, because I qualified 6, 7, 9. That like 4-week range between 7 and 10, I was just jamming Olave because I think there's a few guys that will always be under projected just because the same. I know people are getting their sources from ETR or whatever they're getting their projections from. They usually stick with the same guys, and they're less prone to adjusting adjusting these projections. So I think Olave was one of those guys. Odunze was always over projected. Same thing with Marv on the Cardinals. He was always over projected. I get a lot of success from having different projections, so don't be afraid to get different.
Yeah, absolutely. Well articulated there. Some people are trying to spread their exposures. I think you're one of those people that aren't afraid to lean into what you think is mispriced. So yeah, really cool to hear that. And then I saw Michael Wilson's name down here, and I just remember you shouted this one out before he broke onto the scene. No one really saw that coming, but you did. I nearly qualified this week. We had been chatting a bit, and you really liked Michael Wilson. What goes into like anticipating or having the foresight to see a breakout like that? Was he just popping in your projections, or?
His stuff was popping in my projections. I think a lot of people didn't account for Brissett and just like the sheer volume that he puts out, especially when the running back room towards the end of the season got really messed up. And I think he also had a really crazy breakout week. Well, not breakout, but he had a crazy week the week of the Dog Bowl final as well, and people still weren't. The projections still didn't catch up to his target share and his role within the offense. So I think the Michael Wilson projections towards the end of the season were just like kind of insane. Like people just weren't adjusting in time.
Yeah, this was week 11, so you got ahead of that just in time. I think you banked a contest this week as well. I don't have that screenshot, but I remember we had been discussing, and you weren't able to enter the Dog Bowl this week. Otherwise, you probably would have qualified again. But I want to say it was the fullback dive, maybe.
Maybe I don't remember. It's hard because underdog. I just sometimes just try to jam as many concepts as possible, because obviously the roster, basically everything on underdog, you don't have to worry about. For me at least, right now I don't have to worry about like the prize pool structure. Obviously, different bankrolls you want to try to play different contests, but usually I use the same projections I use the same projections for every contest except for obviously the Badge Bros Brawl, which is like the 3-man.
Mm-hmm.
Different contests where it's like some of the higher stakes stuff where obviously there's less entrance. You can just play more of a floor. If you're playing the main battle royale, you can always the main battle royale. It's if you want to bink, you have to scroll way down because of just how massive the contests are. So something like fullback dive would probably make sense for me because of the higher pay point and flatter structure, where I can just jam Michael Wilson and be fine with it because it's not like he was going undrafted or anything like that.
Mm-mm.
But it's like the perfect floor that you need for that contest.
Yeah, I honestly think now that you mentioned the big battle royale, I think you also did well in that contest this week. I have a weird memory, but I think you got maybe like 11th or something. And Michael Wilson was about 40% owned in the 12-mans, but he was near undrafted in the 6-mans because that was a big time scroll. And that was before he burst onto the scene. So some of the sharper drafters in the 12-mans were kind of catching on, but I want to say you had a lot of leverage in the 6-man that week and nearly shipped the big battle royale. Yeah, so now that we talked a little bit about how the sauce is made with the Dog Bowl, let's talk about the actual experience. So you qualified 3 times, which means you got to draft 3 times as many lineups as everyone else. I think if you qualify, you get 3 lineups. So that means you had 9, right?
I think it was 4. I think it was. Sorry, I have the badge here actually. I think Actually, no, I'm tripping. It was 9. Yeah, it was 3 each.
Okay.
So there was 9 total drafts. Yeah, sorry, that makes sense. So yeah, there was 9 total drafts. I sat there for each one of them. It was me and Dan J. Preciado. I forgot how to say
Preciado. Yep.
Yeah, but it was him and me. It was a super fun experience. I think that the Dog Bowl is just something I always strive for. It's a cool experience because the underdog team the draft team is pretty small. So it's great to see these guys. Great to see the influencers. And it's a great sweat.
Yeah. So before I spoil how it went for you, you just want to talk about how that experience went, what it was like meeting guys like Pete and the Badge Bros. I'm sure you've met them before because you've qualified in the past, both for the NFL and NBA, but just talk about like what it was really like to be there and, talking shop with all the other drafters and the experience of the destination and then just ultimately how it went for you.
Yeah. I will say first time I qualified there's been 3 years of dogbowl so far. And the first year I wasn't really playing. But the second year I was lucky enough to double qualify, and that was in Dallas. And I remember I was super nervous because that was the first time I was ever meeting these guys. Like obviously at that time I already, I talked to John and Nez. I think I've already popped up on their stream before, but that was like my first time meeting them in person. And the meeting, of course, obviously the big names, like Lee was there, Viper was there, Crutches was there, like these big names that like are always drafting. And I was super nervous. But this time, because also within that time I went to the NBA one, I felt a lot more comfortable on the second one because, like, I've kind of established myself. I've met these guys before. It was a super fun experience. We got to go to Kauffman Stadium, so that's the Royals, and that was in Missouri. Obviously, that was in Kansas City. Super fun experience. That was my first time ever being on a baseball field in terms of like for these big stadiums, and I had a lot of fun. So what you do is obviously the watch party's on Sunday and you got draft Saturday. And there was we were fortunate enough there wasn't like that big of injury news. So like we weren't worrying too much about Q tags. Something that's a little funky is that I think for basketball, and so this could happen for football too, I guess, with some Q tags, but you could be in the middle of a draft and news will break out. And if you draft early, you're completely screwed. It's so crazy. It's a crazy dynamic. But we kind of got lucky with this one where there was nothing to really sweat. There was a picture of me because at that point I was in my zone. I was pretty comfortable with drafting these 12 mans, and there was a picture of me playing Tetris at the time in between rounds, because I was like getting in my zone, getting comfortable, and it's really fun that at the end, right? As soon as you're done, you have nothing to worry about, basically, right? Like everybody expects Sunday to be a big sweat, and of course it is, right? Like within these plays, but at that point, you've done everything that you can, right? So you just sit there and you just watch and you just try your best to enjoy these sweats.
Yeah. Once you're done drafting, it's out of your hands. You can only do as much as you can to prepare. So now it's Sunday, your teams are drafted, the games are going. How did it all pan out?
Yeah, I didn't want to I didn't want to spoil it, but I was getting smoked. I was probably like min cashing a couple lineups or something like that, and part of me at the time didn't want to complain because I was lucky I was playing on Saturday the night before and I binked for basketball. So it's like, okay, whatever happens this weekend, like I'll be fine with it, right? And I was still kind of bummed out with how I drafted because a lot of the sims or projections and stuff like that, they were like, oh, some of the teams I had were like pretty good. I got good VORP. The nice thing obviously about having more seats is that you can really play the way that you want to. A lot of these guys kind of, if you only have one seed, you get three drafts. Like they want to get their guy, so they'll take sacrifices. And obviously having 9, I can really play different sides of the coin. But I was doing terrible, and towards the end of the fourth quarter of the 4 p.m. games, I decided to go home. Well, not go home, go to the hotel, because it was basically the Rams. It was the Rams Cardinals game, and it was like, okay, I'm basically screwed. I'm not like winning at all, and it was really cold in because they're opening their prediction market or something in December, but December in Kansas City is not obviously a great really a warm destination. So we called an Uber to go back. It took a while, and by the time we got back to the hotel, I ordered some ramen because I wanted something warm to eat that wasn't like wings and burgers and stuff like that. I think Michael Wilson scored. I can't remember who scored, but suddenly I was climbing up the leaderboard. I don't think it was Wilson. It might have been Puka, because I remember one of the teams I had stacked was I had a stacked Jacoby and Wilson, Michael Wilson team, and so they were driving down the field, and I was suddenly in third, and I was getting texts from like Numi and Pete and stuff. They're like, "Yo, you gotta be here. Like, if you win and you're not here at the end of the fourth quarter, like we're gonna have a problem." So I hurried on back, and by the time I got there, unfortunately, I was watching the play-by-play on ESPN on my phone. But by the time I got there, the game was basically over. But I was super happy. I got third, and I cashed a couple other lineups. But it was really great to go from min cashing to a podium finish.
So it looks like you got third for 60,000, and then you got sixth for 35,000.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if it's better to start off hot and then tail off a little bit, or to start off cold and then race up the boards. But I'd honestly argue that it's more exciting when it happens this way. And then, like you said, you also had a sick NBA hit that weekend. So yeah, altogether, just a really successful weekend for you there.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I remember because that week I was higher on the Arizona Rams game. Like, I personally do like the late sweat because it's one of those, like, okay, it's not over until it's like actually over, right? Because if you stack these late games, and that was probably like one of the only times where I felt like so hopeless about like, hey, there's no way I'm shooting up this leaderboard. Because I think also Cognition, the guy who won, I think he had a Blake Corum team, and there was like a 50-yard, he got like a 50-yard touchdown. I was like, okay, it's basically over, because that was the same Rams Cardinals game. It was a lot of fun. I mean, I wouldn't have had it any other way. It's obviously a very close finish. It was only 2 points separating. So I remember the last Cardinals drive. It was like if Michael Wilson basically catches anything, I'm probably shipping. But to go from min cashing to a six-figure finish in total was super fun.
Yeah. Obviously, you can't complain, but it's crazy how close the edges are. Just literally the difference of 2 points there from first to third, and the difference of $130,000. So yeah, all you can do really is give yourself bullets, and you gave yourself as many as you could, and they definitely paid off. So that's super cool to see, man. Leading into the season here, we're only a few weeks from the Dog Bowl lobby opening up. Is your plan the same? You plan to max the contest, try to get 3 more bullets in for the 2026 Dog Bowl?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm gonna be there right when the contest drops week 1. I think for the first few weeks I'm gonna hand draft, just because obviously the first weeks without buys, it can get pretty chaotic, and also there's not really much to worry about in terms of basketball doesn't start for a few months, so I don't have to worry about that. And it's a lot more fun trying to get it done early. I think the year before, got 2 seats, and I really chased it until the very final week to get my third one. But last year I got it done by week 9, and so it was really fun to just relax and watch it play out the last month or so. So I'm just gonna be grinding as soon as I can week 1.
You definitely should. You've clearly proven you have an edge in the contest. And yeah, week 1 compared to week 8 is a completely different beast, because week 1, everyone's healthy. There's no bye week. So definitely a lot of edges to be had week 1 if you know what you're doing. So before we wrap up, I just wanted to take a quick peek just kind of at the ADP landscape on Underdog for the 2026 season. I know you mentioned you're not a best ball guy. Makes a lot of sense. You just don't really want to wrap up your bankroll, and you prefer, grinding it in day out, whether that's MLB, basketball, or football. But yeah, if you haven't seen how things are lining up so far this year, I'll just give you a quick summary. I'd say the main takeaways of how things are shaping up this year are: running back got a lot more expensive.
Yeah, it makes sense.
The top 12 running backs all go in the first 2 rounds now. So that dead zone gets pushed up a lot earlier now. It's basically Achan at pick 17, and then it drops off to Jeremiah Love, who's been slipping. But really, we see a bunch of these running backs get pushed up into the first and second round now. So one thing, running back got a lot more expensive. And then number 2, elite quarterback got a lot cheaper. Outside of Allen, who's even cheaper this year at 36, you see all the guys like Lamar at 56, Jaden 69, Hurts, Burrow. I would call it the quarterback sweet spot of like the elites that aren't Josh Allen is around round 5, 6, 7. So the quarterbacks got cheaper. And then one other takeaway would just be people are starting, I guess, to get a bit sharper in general. You see a lot of the tight ends are, other than the elites, even the elites are pretty cheap. Like you can get Trey McBride mid-round 3. Regardless of how well he did this last season, there was just like no reprice on him. If anything, he got a little cheaper. And then the Kincaids of the world, Mark Andrews, Ferguson's, they're all going late, like 12th, 13th round. So what are your thoughts about that? I know you don't play a lot of best ball, but do you see anyone playing this incorrectly in your opinion? Do you think there's some mispricings? Like, what do you see?
Yeah, I would say one thing I want to scroll down to is the Jeremiah Love ADP. I know obviously he's dealing with things now, but I'm not a big proponent. I did play best ball a couple years ago, but just like how things project throughout the season, especially the first couple weeks. So there's some similarities. I think that the rookies always seem to be overprojected. I think that they'll be overpriced too in terms of ADP, just because of how psychologically people want to play it with these rookies. I remember a couple years ago it was the same thing where they were overpriced. I wouldn't be that high on rookies. Running backs going early makes perfect sense. I mean, I think that's more sharp than like that's how it should almost always be played. That running back should be earlier. And tight ends you just kind of want to lower down, right? Because like some of these guys, like as you can see, playing dog bowl, right? Like you can just have a Hunter Henry nuke week, and it's just like that's just what you want. Like some of these guys just have the capability for the ceilings, right? Like or somebody like because with best ball, right? Like players like JMO or players like Alec Pierce, right? Have a lot of value just because of their ceilings compared to what you play in a daily, weekly, right? Where if you're more risk adverse, you don't really want to play them that much. Speaking of JMO, like in dog bowl wise, like I almost never played him because obviously he has that ceiling because of that speed and the offense that he plays in. But for the most part, it's like boom or bust, right? Like some of these guys, like as you can see, like you can get by with a Kamara 5 points, right? But JMO's pretty much boom or bust. I'm kind of curious to see what his ADP is actually in that offense. Yeah, I mean, who are the other receivers at 50?
Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, DJ Moore, Christian Watson.
Yeah, I would still put. Actually, I think it's kind of fair. There's some names around him that I would full fade at that range. Like Rome, I would probably fade at that range. I'm not big. I saw the Marv ADP also. Not really a big fan. There's some things that even throughout, even like with changing seasons and things like that, I wouldn't be high on. It's kind of a shame that Tyson the injury he's dealing with. So obviously there's it's kind of crazy to see how the best ball landscape changes. So like you said, we're a couple weeks out, and now great, people were jamming Tyson for the entire month of August. We're just basically screwed now,
Yeah, there's give and take with best ball. You're gonna have some dead teams, but your early ones will also be super teams. It's a bit of a give take, and then I've always been a fan of the barbell approach: draft some early, draft some during training camp, and then draft some right before the season starts. So, no, well said. I think the lobbyists definitely are getting sharper. So, got to constantly be finding ways to find edges. But yeah, man, this was a lot of fun. I really appreciate you coming on here. Your story is awesome, super inspiring, and hopefully there's some people out there that are going to hear it and it gives them some motivation. So yeah, last thing I'll leave you with is, I know we talked about some goals, but with the season coming up in a few weeks, what are just not long-term goals, but just some things you're really trying to accomplish this season coming up NFL wise?
I want to play a lot more salary cap. I think last year I underdog. It's very obviously it's not as big as FanDuel, DraftKings, so you can basically max things and still be fine for the most part. But last year I kind of dabbled a little bit just because of the way I play. I'm a big max. I like having more entries and being able to diversify my portfolio. So I wasn't playing as much salary cap. So I really want to get into that. I think cash games on Underdog are a lot of fun. I think that there's only a handful of people, so they'll know me if they're watching this. But I think cash games on Underdog are a lot of fun. There's a lot of edge there. A lot of guys who are just jamming late at night. So I mean, if anybody wants to play against me, you'll see me in a lot of these cash games for NFL. And honestly, I do want to hand draft more. I know it can get really hard, especially midway through the season. But for the first few weeks, I want to hand draft as many teams as possible because um, as much of a time saver as auto drafting is, and like it's nice to get different and stuff like that, being able to hand draft and sit there and see the roster construction and the people in your lobby, there's a infinitely times more edge to do that than auto drafting. So that's my goal.
Yeah, awesome, man. And you definitely proved you have an edge auto drafting, but if you put in that extra effort to, really put your signature on all your drafts, I think the sky's the limit. Like maybe it'll be 3 qualifiers by week 3 this year. Who knows? But yeah, man, thank you so much for your time. This was a really fun conversation. He is awen419 on Twitter if you want to give him a follow. And any last words before we head out?
Nope. I mean, just anybody that's new to the scene or just wants to try to get better. I mean, it's a lot easier than you think. And just gotta rework your process. Don't worry about it.
Definitely, man. Best of luck in the MLB streets later, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me. Bye bye.
Absolutely.
Being like, I know ball. I know who the best plays are.